Welcome to DDReg Knowledge Capsule. Today, we're diving into something really critical, but maybe a bit overlooked sometimes: signal detection in low volume markets. Imagine you're part of a pharmacovigilance team, a PV team. Your job is drug safety, but the data you have, it's just so limited. Traditional methods, they just can't really make sense of it. It really is like trying to hear a whisper in a hurricane, isn't it? Finding these vital safety signals when there's hardly any data noise, or maybe too much noise and too little signal. That's the core problem in markets with small patient numbers. How do you spot potential adverse events when the data is so thin? It's totally different from big markets, right?
Absolutely. And the stakes are, well, incredibly high. There's this twofold risk, and it's serious. On one side, you got patients in these smaller markets who might be left vulnerable because safety issues aren't picked up fast enough or reliably enough. And on the other side, the companies, the ones bringing these often vital drugs to market, they struggle to keep that regulatory trust, which is, fundamental. The real challenge isn't just doing it, it's doing it reliably, doing it early, and crucially, keeping up with all the changing regulatory expectations. They're always evolving.
I see. So it's not just a theoretical risk. It hits patients directly and it hits the company's ability to operate. That really raises the stakes. Okay, so our mission today is to really dig into how smart PV teams are managing this, how they're turning this limited data into actual insights. We'll explore why it's so different, what methods they're using, the regulations, the tech, all of that. And we're drawing heavily today from a really insightful DDReg Pharma article, Signal Detection in Low Volume Markets, How Smart PV Teams Stay Ahead. So maybe before we jump into the solutions, let's just quickly level set. What exactly is signal detection in this context? It's about spotting those potential links, right, between a drug and some side effect, an adverse event that needs a closer look. But doing that basic job in these low volume markets, it just gets incredibly complicated.
Yeah, that's where the unique landscape really comes into play. Big markets, they might have tons of data, robust reporting, statistical power. Low volume markets face huge hurdles. You've got, well, naturally small patient populations, so limited exposure to the drug in the first place. This often means a really high noise to signal ratio. Makes it super hard to tell a real signal from just, random chance. Plus, in many of these places, the infrastructure for reporting adverse events might still be developing. So reports can be delayed, or maybe just fewer come in. And then there are sometimes regulatory gaps or infrastructure issues you just don't see in bigger, more established markets.
And the impact of all that, what does it really mean on the ground?
It's pretty severe. You risk delaying the recognition of safety problems, and that directly impacts patient safety. When safety's compromised, well, regulatory confidence takes a hit too. Confidence in the company, in the drug.
It sounds like a really tough cycle to break.
It is. But it's important to remember the basic steps of signal detection. They don't change fundamentally. You still have data collection, standardization, mining, evaluation, integration, management. All that's consistent. What has to change is how you do those steps. The methods, the tools you use have to be adapted for these low data situations. It's less about a different what, more about a smarter how.
Okay, that makes sense. So, given these big challenges, how are PV teams adapting? How do they make these methods work when the data is so, well, sparse? Traditional stats need big numbers, right? How do they function with so little?
It's exactly the right question. Let's break down these adapted methods. First, the quantitative side, the statistical stuff. Traditionally, you've got things like ROR, the reporting odds ratio, or PRR, proportional reporting ratio. They're great for huge data sets. They work by spotting disproportionality, basically, seeing if an event pops up more with your drug than you'd expect compared to others. Objective, scalable for large volumes. But the big downside, in small data sets, they're often ineffective. They can throw up false positives because they just lack the statistical power, not enough data points. So the shift now is from, let's say, statistical brute force just relying on volume to more statistical finesse. And there have been some really key advances, even recently. Things like the product fractional reporting ratio, PFRR, and also these advanced flexible Bayesian models. They're being developed specifically to be more robust, more reliable, even in smaller databases. These models use context, prior knowledge, probabilities. They can find signals where older methods just saw noise. Is a real step forward for sparse data.
That sounds like a massive shift, going from volume to these more nuanced statistical tools that find meaning in less data. But does using complex things like Bayesian models bring new challenges, like needing specialized skills, or even just interpreting the results?
Oh, absolutely. That's a really sharp point. Yes, it does. It definitely shifts the required skill set more towards data science, advanced biostatistics. Training becomes really important. But, the potential benefits for patient safety usually make tackling those implementation challenges worthwhile. And it's not just about the stats. Qualitative methods, the clinical review side, they're still incredibly important,
especially for complex events, or really rare ones where the numbers alone don't paint the full picture. This means experts looking closely at individual case reports, ICSRs, considering things like dose. Did the event come back if the drug was given again? The timing. The upside is deep insight into specific cases. The challenge, it's labor-intensive, can be subjective, and it's hard to scale up for looking at everything. So to boost this, we're seeing more use of other things like mining medical literature, using patient registry data, and using natural language processing, NLP, to pull insights from unstructured text in reports, things a manual review might miss.
So it's like a blend then. Human clinical expertise combined with some pretty smart technology. And these new methods, they aren't just appearing out of nowhere, right? There must be regulatory forces pushing and shaping this. What's happening on that front?
Regulations are definitely a huge driver. Globally, you have ICH E2E, which provides that harmonized framework for signal detection and risk management, kind of the international standard. Then in the U.S., the FDA uses its FAIRS database, relies on spontaneous reports and data mining. And a key update there, since 2024, the FDA started publishing quarterly lists of potential serious risk signals. Much more transparency.
Which puts pressure on companies to be just as vigilant, I imagine.
Exactly. Then over in Europe, the EMA's GVP Module 9X is the big one, the EU's Guide for Good Pharmacovigilance Practices. And there's a major update coming into force, really, around 2025. The Implementing Regulation, EU 2251466, makes it mandatory for all marketing authorization holders, the companies with the drug licenses in the EEA, to actively monitor vigilance. It's the EU's main adverse event database. This ends the old pilot program. Now everyone has to be actively looking, which is crucial for spotting signals, especially in smaller EU countries. And also in 2025, GVP Module 6 Addendum 2 brings in new rules about masking personal data in reports. It's about balancing patient privacy with still having useful data for safety analysis.
Wow, that is a lot of regulatory movement. It really shows governments are pushing for more proactive, more transparent safety monitoring. But where does AI and machine learning fit into all this, especially with these new pushes? Is it more than just hype?
Oh, it's definitely more than hype. AI, machine learning, advanced analytics, they're becoming essential tools, really helping to strengthen detection, especially where data is scarce. Take those Bayesian hierarchical models we mentioned. They're powerful because they can estimate probabilities even with little data by smartly borrowing strength, incorporating prior knowledge from bigger populations or similar drugs. Helps fill the gaps.
Okay.
Then natural language processing, NLP. It's changing how we deal with all the unstructured text doctor's notes, patient narratives, pulling out key information that was hard to get at before.
Like a super efficient assistant for the clinical reviewers.
Kind of, yeah. And machine learning classifiers can help automatically triage cases, prioritizing the serious ones, routing things to the right experts, optimizing resources when you don't have much data to start with. And then there's real-world data, RWD, RWE. Things like electronic health records, patient registries, even data from wearables sometimes. This gives supplementary evidence, expands the picture beyond just the spontaneous reports, which is vital when those reports are few and far between.
So it's not just about speed. It sounds like it's about extending human capabilities into data that was maybe too messy or too small to handle effectively before. Finding that needle in a smaller, trickier haystack. And even the CIO MES Working Group 14th, you mentioned their 2025 draft. They're emphasizing transparency, fairness, human oversight for AI in PV.
That's right. Because while the tech is powerful, we need to use it responsibly, ethically, especially when dealing with vulnerable patients and limited data. It needs that robust framework.
Okay, so stepping back, the challenges are clear. Few reports, underreporting, high noise, old methods not sensitive enough, privacy issues, slow detection. It sounds daunting.
It can feel that way. You can imagine a PV team just staring at a handful of reports thinking, what can we even do with this?
Oh, right. So how do the smart teams fight that feeling? What are the core strategies they're actually using to get past these data limits?
Well, they're definitely not just sitting back. There are several core strategies emerging.
Yeah.
First, using global databases like WHO Vigibase. Pooling data globally helps increase the sheer volume of reports available for analysis.
Makes sense. Strengthen numbers globally.
Second, using those advanced analytics, we talked about Bayesian methods, AML, to really boost sensitivity in small data sets, finding subtle patterns. Third, looking across products or classes. If you see a potential issue with drug A and drugs B and C are similar, maybe you look for signals there too, even with limited data for B and C, learning from related drugs.
Kind of like looking for family resemblances for safety issues.
Exactly. Fourth, collaboration is key. Partnering with groups like CIOMs, WHO, regional health bodies, standardizing data, sharing insights, it all helps. And finally, really integrating that real-world data. EHRs, registries, digital health data. Expanding the view beyond just those spontaneous reports gives a much richer picture.
That sounds like a really proactive, multi-layered approach, much more than just waiting for forms to arrive. Can you share a real-world example, a case study that shows this in action?
Absolutely. Let's take a look at a case from the Latin American rare disease market. There was a Brazilian biotech company. They launched a new gene therapy for a rare metabolic disorder. Really groundbreaking stuff. But in the first year, they only treated about 50 patients across the whole region. Very small numbers, typical for rare diseases. And as you'd expect, they only got just two, adverse event reports in that first year.
2 reports for 50 patients? Yeah, you can't run traditional stats on that. What did they do?
Right, they couldn't just wait. The PV team took several smart, proactive steps. First, they set up a dedicated patient registry, working directly with the hospitals involved. This let them systematically collect detailed safety and efficacy data over the longer term. They also did surveys with physicians, asking specifically about quality of life outcomes, getting broader clinical feedback that might hint at subtle problems. And really interestingly, they started monitoring caregiver forums and social media, looking for early, maybe anecdotal signals or patient concerns that wouldn't show up in formal reports yet, kind of an early warning system.
Using online chatter as a data source? That's innovative.
It can be carefully done. And finally, they put together a local advisory board, clinicians, patient advocates, to get real-time insights into what patients were actually experiencing. The result of all this: within 18 months, this multi-pronged approach allowed them to detect a rare but serious adverse event linked to the therapy, something the 2 reports alone would never have revealed clearly. This led to a quick update of the drug's label, which obviously helped protect patients. But it also boosted the regulators' confidence in the company's safety processes. And importantly, it helped ensure that patients could continue to access this vital therapy, all because they looked beyond the standard methods.
That's a fantastic example. It really shows how creativity and strategic thinking can make a massive difference when data is scarce. It underlines that point perfectly. It's not just about the data you have, but how smart you are about gathering and analyzing it. So, wrapping up our deep dive today, the core message seems clear. Signal detection in low-volume markets isn't just about data volume. It really demands strategic thinking, staying aligned with regulations, and using technology smartly and responsibly.
Exactly. I think the future of pharmacovigilance, especially in these smaller or emerging markets, it's going to be defined by how well companies weave together these AI tools, real-world evidence, and that crucial human oversight. It's all about building a more sensitive, more proactive safety net, ensuring no patient falls through the cracks just because their market happens to be small.
Absolutely. And as we finish up, here's something for you, our listeners, to think about. Given this need for innovative data sources and methods in drug safety when data is limited, how could other fields facing similar challenges, maybe in science or social research or even business, apply these lessons? What unconventional sources of information could you tap into in your own work when the usual data just isn't giving you the answers you need? Something to mull over.